The ideas that gave birth to our nation are the ideas that our nation is resistant to right now, and we should talk about that all the time.
In a world where narratives are shaped by corporations and gatekeepers, independent voices matter more than ever. Badlands Media brings together citizen journalists, researchers, and independent thinkers.
The truth is triggering.
Question the narrative. Explore the facts.
It's authenticity, courage, resilience.
Search for the truth others won't.
It's not about being first or being right.
The information war is changing.
It's about being authentic.
Embrace the friction.
Embrace the friction.
Shut the f*** up.
Authentically antagonizing. Join the movement.
I'm going to say how I feel.
Follow Badlands Media.
This is about the future.
The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good. Good afternoon. I think.
All right.
You were
that was
grabbing
a bit of a
coffee.
stumbling intro there. Yeah, sorry. The new intro is a lot shorter than the previous intro, and so I thought that I had as much time as we used to have, but not so.
Yes. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Breaking History. It feels like it's been a while since we've gotten together. That's been happening a lot lately, but and I need to get. Hold on one second. Yeah, so today is April 22nd, 2026. What episode is this? Is this like episode 100 and we gotta be on episode like 100?
I think it's 143. 140.
Jeez.
Happy 143rd episode.
There you go. Well, yeah, man, it's great to see you. How have you been? How was the travels?
Oh, it was good. Went to Sweden. Met some friends, so it wasn't too business oriented, but it was an interesting experience. So just happy to get back and dealing now with the piles and piles of things on the to-do list that have grown, which is always what happens when you leave town for a few days. So yeah. Man, how are you doing?
I'm good. Things have just been busy, but and there's a lot to just keep up with and track, but very actually encouraged by everything that's happening, despite some of the zeitgeist being negative. And I think I heard John talking about this the other day, but I think there's a lot of like burnout and a lot of, there's a lot of like cynicism, burnout, and fatigue that people are feeling. But yeah, I mean, we will kind of unpack and talk about all that today. I did want to point out that today's episode is sponsored by Patriot Protect. And we'll do the full ad read here later in the show, but just wanted to give them a shout out. Go to patriot-protect.com/history, promo code Badlands, and we'll give you the full details on them here in a bit. But big shout out to Patriot Protect, and thank you for sponsoring today's episode. So what you normally ask me what I'm thinking and what I've been hearing and seeing. So today I will flip the script on you and ask you, what are you thinking? I'll share my thoughts as well, but what are you thinking? What are you seeing? And what are you noticing?
Well, I've been mapping a lot the controlled scarcity. So for me, I've been trying to look objectively just at where is the reduction in production and energy, and as well as all of the other basic necessities. So I'm concerned right now based on this array, internationally since the early March period, late February, there has been a lot of these refineries going up in smoke, sabotage, shutting them down. 3 in Texas, the most recent one in Australia. One of the biggest ones. They used to be 10 actually in Australia about 20 years ago. Now it's down to 2. 8 of the 10 were decommissioned over the last 20 years by this whole depopulation orientation. So now one of the only 2 remaining ones just was shut down through sabotage. India, Indonesia, there's massive refineries being sabotaged as well. Colorado, One was the biggest one just next to Denver that supplies all of Colorado's natural gas and energy was just decommissioned for no good reason except that it hit some environmental. It pissed some environmentalists off inside of the regulatory commissions at the I don't know where, state or federal level. Five were decommissioned in California, and there's more. I mean, it's a big list. Russian refineries as well were attacked, seriously damaged in drone attacks. So there's again just a big reduction on top of what we're seeing with the chaos in the Strait of Hormuz. So I've been just mapping that out a little bit to try to get a sense of like where is the reduction of the means of supporting life on Earth being orchestrated. And it seems like a lot of this is coincident in my mind with the entire gambit in Iran, and it's a concern. I don't know if that's something you've been looking at, but it's for me the depopulation program that seems to be orchestrated right now seems to be a big one.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me, and by the way, check your microphone, make sure you're on the right mic.
Yes.
You might be on your computer, Mike. That happens to me sometimes. StreamYard messes with that.
Yeah, you're totally correct. That is exactly what happened.
Yeah, so I would certainly agree with you that there's definitely a conflict of like narratives happening here, a conflict of between probably groups that are vying for control of these systems, and it's very clear, like I don't know if you saw this, like Maria Corina Machado thing that happened in Spain the other day.
No.
1 minute. Let me see this. Let me see if I can pull this up. And there's something going on with the mic now. It's like squeaking. You're getting like a lot of squeaking from you. I don't know if that's. I'm just giving you a heads up. I don't know if that's if you're on the right mic still, but
yeah, this is the good mic. How's this quality of sound coming?
That sounds better. Yeah, your quality is good. It's just like you're getting a lot of like feedback. There's like feedback or something, reverberation. Weird. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So, CanCon and I were laughing about this yesterday on Badlands Daily, but so there was some rally that happened in Spain. I think this is in Madrid, and Maria Corina Machado, who is the CIA cutout that was supposed to take over Venezuela after the CIA ran its color revolution there. They're still trying to do that. And I looked around the information battle space online, and all of these people were posting the exact same thing. And a lot of these people were, MAGA centric influencers, people whose name, this crowd would recognize, this audience would recognize, and probably believe them to be like earnest, voices in this populist movement. But if you look at like what they're doing here, the copy paste that they're doing is, let's see, gosh, it was like, yeah, here it is. It's like, holy shit, tens of thousands of patriots just surged into Madrid for anti-left and pro-Trump. Maria Corina Machado of Venezuela, communism is losing. But it's every single one is like, holy shit, must watch, breaking, tens of thousands of royals.
Yeah, okay, AI bots are at it. Yeah.
I don't think it's all AI bots though, because their characters, like this guy Eric Doherty, it's like he has 1 million followers, and he like fancies himself as like a like a MAGA influencer. There's a lot of characters like that,
real people.
So, okay, yeah, I mean, quote unquote real. So the point is that like these networks, I think, have all been activated, and I think it's becoming very obvious like who's aligned with this stuff and who's being paid, I think, under orders to post this stuff. And the point again of Maria Corina Machado, in my opinion, and this is just going back and looking at the totality of evidence, the full body of evidence, is that her purpose launched just she was launched in 2002, 4 years after Hugo Chavez came into power. Her whole purpose, I think, was to go into Venezuela, take over, and then restore the oil rights to ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, the Bush family, the Bush dynasty friends, like the friends of the Bush family. Like that's who I think she serves like that group, like Langley, CIA, Bush dynasty, that whole group. And so seeing that they're still desperately trying to install her and they're trying to convince Trump that she should be installed, Trump's like, yeah, she has no support. Like nobody knows who she is. Like nobody cares about her. She's a nobody. That is evidence to me that there is a conflict between Trump and the people in his direct orbit, that they're not on the same page, because the people who are pushing this woman are still like some of the people who we would think ostensibly are like Trump surrogates, Trump allies, people that are very close to Trump. And yet they are subverting him. They appear to be trying to subvert him like at every single step of the way. And more, it's like the whole removal of Nicolas Maduro is making a lot of sense now, where they like removed Nicolas Maduro, kept the rest of the government in place, and now Trump's like, okay, everything's cool. Like we're friends with Venezuela now. They're our buddies. The big bad villain is gone now. They're now like he's called them our greatest ally a few times now. He said that we have a 10 out of 10 relationship with them, and yet that doesn't seem to be good enough. Like lifted all the sanctions, restored all diplomacy, opened up the American embassy. And yet that doesn't seem to be enough for whatever you want to call it, the GOP. I mean, the Republican establishment, the Uniparty. I'm so sick of trying to figure out a name to call these people. But Maria Corina Machado clearly is their agent, and they're still trying to install her. We're now seeing the same exact model, I think, unfold in Iran, where Trump.
The Shah is still the Machado of Iran, right?
Yeah. I mean, Pahlavi is definitely the Machado of Iran, but I think the where that story arc has like followed what, once I accepted that, okay, we're doing this Iran war narrative, like, didn't see that coming, but here we are. The expectation that I had, this thing is going to follow some form of a Venezuela model, understanding that the two countries are very different and there's complexity and differences, of course. What I expected to see is a very controlled schedule where there would be like narrative escalation, like Trump putting out his bombastic rhetoric, right? Escalating the narrative, getting everyone ginned up, chumming the waters, and the piranhas come in and everyone gets into a feeding frenzy. And then suddenly just rug pulling the whole thing and saying, all right, we're cool. Like mission accomplished. We're done. We're moving on. We're now going to work with the people in Iran, and they're going to be a great ally now. He's already started that rhetoric for the past 2 weeks. He's been like, even in the week leading up to the ceasefire, he was saying like they're good people in Iran that we've been talking to, we're working with, and we're going to make something happen. They want to make something happen. We want to make something happen. He's still putting out the bombastic stuff. He's still putting out like the almost like the villainous stuff. Like he's almost, I said a long time ago that I think Trump is kind of almost playing like the Joker character now. Like he played Batman originally and that didn't work, right? Quote unquote, didn't work. So now he's going to play the Joker. Like now he's going to don like the villain mask. He's going to become kind of the bad guy. And what that has done, I think, is number one is it's kind of like shown an attack vector to the enemy. Like, hey, here's the attack vector. We can separate Trump from his base by leaning into he is controlled by Zionists. He's controlled by Israel. We can also, excuse me. Sorry, I had to plug my computer in. The other part of it is that I think he has whipped up all of this sentiment of like war among the warmongers, where they're like full bore. They are full bore war with Iran, and then all of a sudden, it's over. Like he literally went on Monday, the day after Easter, from saying we're going to nuke this civilization. That's effectively what he said. He said we're going to annihilate the civilization. Also teased in the same speech that we might make peace with them. The next day announced a ceasefire with them. That was 2 weeks ago. Said they have 2 weeks to figure out like a peace deal. And then before it expired yesterday, he puts out and says, I'm extending the ceasefire because there's so much disarray and so much disorganization. The way he's presenting it is that the power structure has collapsed in Iran and that there's now like infighting among these different factions to vying for control. And he's like, I'm waiting for them to all organize themselves so we can negotiate. Meanwhile, I think what's really happened is they've engaged in the continuity of government protocol. Yeah. And that's why they're all they're all kind of operating independently.
I-
But the point is
Yeah.
though is that while he's still kind of maintaining some of that that antagonistic rhetoric, he's very clearly like laying the foundation for this is over. Like the whole thing's over. He said multiple times the war is over. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is like, the war is not over. We're still fighting. Like we've swam halfway across this river. We can't turn back now. There's no going back. We're past the point of no return. And again, I think we're going to see the U.S. exit from the stage here, and Israel just plow forward with their Greater Israel project, which they absolutely are doing. And that I think has accelerated something that was probably going to play out in a much longer time scale. It also, the net effect of all of this is that now this whole like Iran is evil and we have to go to war with them narrative, like that whole story arc has come full circle, and like that can't be used again. I mean, just like the Venezuela thing can't be used. They can't come out and say, well, Venezuela is evil. They have an evil government, so we need to oppose them and we need to, wage asymmetrical warfare against them. That's now, I think, going to be applied to Iran, and to the chagrin and the dismay of the entire apparatus, the entire like uniparty apparatus.
So yeah, the Greater Israel thing that coincides with the rebuilding of Solomon's temple definitely plays in a big way for sure. But I noticed that one of your recent posts on Telegram, you brought something to my attention that I hadn't really been paying attention to, which was this announcement that Trump, well, actually, he had already read a certain passage from Genesis as part of this American Reads the Bible week, which
last night, yeah,
it was aired last night. I thought it actually took place live earlier, but maybe it was last night that it took place originally as the reading.
It seems like to me it looked like he pre-recorded it and then it played. Cause I think what it is it's like, I don't know if it's 24/7, but it's like they're reading the entire Bible. So it's like celebrity, like guest speakers are coming in and like reading passages from the Bible.
It's not the whole Bible. Well, oh yeah, I see. But Trump's team, what I found interesting is that like Pete Hegseth and Rubio and Susie Wiles and Trump have arranged to read through Genesis and Revelations. So the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end idea. Chronicles, right, was the second Chronicles 7 passages 11 to 22 were the specific selections that Trump had read. Did you look into those? Like, did you reread those?
Oh yeah. I actually have it right here. If you want me to read it, I'll read it right now. 2 Chronicles 7, 11 through 22. And I'll read it to you. It says, when Solomon had finished the house of the Lord in the royal palace, successfully carrying out all that was in his heart to do for the house of the Lord and for his own palace, the Lord appeared to him at night and said to him, I have heard your prayers and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. If I close the sky so there is no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send a plague among my people, and if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear them from heaven, forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. For I have now chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. And as for you, if you walk before me as your father David walked, doing all I have commanded you, and if you keep my statutes and ordinances, then I will establish your royal throne as I covenanted with your father David when I said, you will never fail to have a man to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the statutes and commandments I have set before you, and if you go off to serve and worship other gods, then I will uproot Israel from the soil I have given them, and I will banish from my presence this temple I have sacrificed for my name. I will make it an object of scorn and ridicule among all the peoples. And when this temple has become a heap of rubble, all who pass by it will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? And others will say, because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. Because of this, he has brought all this disaster upon them.
Yep. Very, very interesting, eh? And how to read that specifically, because one could read that from several different possible vantage points as far as what the intention is behind that particular selection within this particular moment in history where we know a lot of fanatics in Israel are really, 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 really excited that now is the big coming out party. And is he basically giving a message saying, like, you have now fallen, Tel Aviv, you've basically fallen for the worship of those multiple, Baalian, Molochian deities that you'd been warned about earlier on in this particular passage? Or is it something a little bit different? But one thing that I found interesting about this too is that it's coinciding with another thing that was just, there's this Arc de Triomphe, the Triumphal Arch that is going to be built according to plans pretty soon. There's a little clip here from a news bit where the model was just unveiled, the actual physical model of what this 250-foot design is going to be in Washington, D.C., featuring there's several of these triumphal arcs around the world, but this would be the biggest were it completed, featuring like the two lions at the base, and one thing that's of interest that I was looking at when that caught my attention was that that's actually modeled on the Napoleon Arc de Triomphe, right, in Paris.
Yep.
Yeah, and so that's a picture there of the Napoleon Arc de Triomphe, which is where you have the different arrondissements and core avenues that all meet. There's like 12. It's kind of done in the form of a sacred geometry in the center of Paris. And, you have a bunch of homages to various battles. Now, it was begun in 1806 by Napoleon. And he actually didn't come up with this design on his own either, right? This was modeled on an earlier similar structure in Rome, called the Arch of Titus, or the Arch of Victory of Titus. And so when you go to the original one that Emperor Titus set up in Rome, it looks like this. Pretty big. This doesn't really show it's not as big as the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and that's not as big. That's like half the size of what the Washington one would be. But it's still pretty big if you see those tiny little people down there at the base.
Mm-hmm.
And that was originally finished in, I think it was 70, or commissioned in 71 by Titus. And that was in celebration of the victory of the Romans against the Jews in the Roman Jewish War. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm familiar with this site. Like I'm not super familiar with it, but I know that it exists. I did not know that that's why it was commissioned by Titus.
Yeah, the war itself was begun under Nero in 66. The same Nero that was like persecuting the Christians, beheading, basically, just killing a shit ton of Christians.
Wow. Okay.
This is actually one of the only surviving renditions of Romans looting the Solomon Temple, featuring the menorah there, a variety of things that were inside this Herod's temple, Solomon's temple.
Yep.
That was taken apart at the end of that war in celebration. So Titus basically said, okay, we're going to celebrate this by building this structure. So it definitely invoked a certain inflection moment. And we all know the psycho trauma embedded inside of the Jewish population at that moment that continued to be sort of a psychological switch to be used at different times, including the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 135, a little bit quite later on, or the attempts to work with Julian the Apostate in 360 to rebuild Solomon's temple. Then Simon Bar Kokhba was the guy who called himself the Messiah of the Jews to lead a rebellion against the Romans in 135 to try to rebuild the temple. So this has been a recurring theme used to weaponize the Jewish population at different moments. And one thing I was looking at within that context is that when Napoleon actually built this thing in 1806, you got to keep in mind, he had just only recently inducted himself or made himself the emperor, not just of France. The idea was for him to be the emperor of a new age. And originally he was consul. So when he came to power, he was modeling himself after the French Revolution, which was chaos. It was a Freemasonic directed chaos operation. He said, I'm going to be a Roman consul, which was like before Rome was an empire, it was still a republic.
And the people still had a Republican spirit. They admired the American Republican example that also was looking to the Roman Republic, of Cicero and the pre-imperial system as their role model for creating a new type of society. And Napoleon said, okay, I'll be your consul. I'll be the Roman Republican principled leader that will usher in this better world. And then it didn't take him long to say, actually, you know what? I'm going to be the emperor instead. And as soon as he did that around 1800, he made a promise to the Jews. Actually, he had a proclamation because he was doing a campaign in Egypt and Judea, and made an open proclamation to rally the support of the Jewish population around a promise to rebuild Solomon's temple. And that's actually an open thing. In 1801, he published this. He created the Sanhedrin of France. So he invited all of the leading rabbis to come to France, which they did, to build a French Sanhedrin as part of the government. And the idea was to reconstitute a homeland of Zion for the Jews that would be peaked with his promise to build the temple. And that didn't follow through because he did lose a few battles, and that kind of got put on a different timeline. But the proximity of that promise was just 4 years before this Arc de Triomphe was commissioned by Napoleon. And it took it another 30 years to finally build this massive structure. It came in many phases. But there's this ongoing continuity of policy that I find a very, just extremely interesting, that ties into what we're seeing now today. Again, how to exactly read that specifically is questionable. There's an ambiguity in the narrative, but it's concrete. It's something definitely worth pulling on, and whether that means we are going to build this up in order to have the wayward Zionists pay the price of having not listened to the edicts of God to Solomon back in Chronicles, or whether it's for the writings of Moses, or whether this is something involving a fulfillment of that plan. I don't know, of the plan of actually building the temple in a positive way without sacrificing any Zionists. I don't really know, but it's definitely weird. So I just wanted to share those considerations there.
No, I actually really appreciate you doing that, because I did not make that connection between the Triumphal Arch. I had assumed that there was some sort of symbolism. The timing of it is fascinating. And then the fact that he read 2 Chronicles. I mean, if you just go and you just read the words of what he wrote, of what he read, he's basically describing what Israel is doing right now. He's like, if you adhere to the commandments, and if you do as I had commanded you originally, I will bless you. And if you don't, if you turn away and you turn to other idols and other gods, then I will curse you. And we see right now that there is just this bloodlust that has swept over the Israeli government. And I think it's fueled mostly by a few things. I've been talking about this for a while now, but I think Netanyahu has a messianic complex. He has a Messiah complex that was imbued in him at a young age by the men around him, the founders of Israel, where he was going to be this secular Messiah, this John the Baptist type figure to pave the way to establish the empire, the physical secular empire, so that the Messiah could come. I think that that's what he believes he's doing. I also think that he is incentivized in this moment to plow forward because he has Damocles' sword hanging over his head in the form of these criminal prosecutions he's facing the minute he's out of office. And he has an election, regardless of whether or not he can maintain the support of the Knesset. He has an election coming up in October, and the sharks have come out, and all of his political opponents are now out there, attacking him and saying that he has destroyed the reputation of Israel around the world. He has, the warmongering is backfiring on them. It's not working out. He's failed in his mission to defeat Iran. He's failed in his mission to defeat Hamas. Those are the accusations. I think that rhetoric and that debate, the way that dialectic is unfolding, is only going to drive him deeper into war to prove those people wrong. And also, as I've said before, I think the public mandate, he secures the public mandate by either a strategic defeat of Iran or by expanding the borders of Israel formally between now and October. which they're now talking about doing in Lebanon and I believe Syria. But I think that what he's activated, maybe not among the entire Israeli population, but among large segments of the political Zionists in Israel, one thing they've always said, like if you go back decades and you go listen to like people who ask them about this stuff, like, okay, so you think that this entire land, like Palestine, like that, like the greater Israel thing has kind of become like out in the open very recently, but going back much further, they've always kind of said, yeah, this entire land, like Palestine, referring to those borders, this all belongs to us. And when they're asked, okay, so how are you going to like annex that? They say, well, we're not going to go out there and like conquer it like with war. God will somehow give it to us. Like those, like we believe in, like we have faith that God will somehow deliver circumstances to us where Palestine comes into our possession. And basically, I'm not the one who's going to fire the first shot, but somebody else will, because God will will it. And then we will, we will reap the benefits of that. Bibi Netanyahu, I think, has now fired that shot. And everyone else in Israel not everyone, but the political elite who have maintained that position see this as their opportunity. Even if Bibi Netanyahu becomes the scapegoat and they blame all the negative backlash of it on him, they see him as a useful tool to expand their borders and like create this empire. I think that's where I think a lot of even the people who aren't aligned with him politically in Israel see him as a useful instrument. So all those conditions I think have set this up for Israel to plow forward, regardless of what the United States does, regardless of what anybody else says or does to them. But the really interesting part, before I pass it back to you, about that passage that Trump read, and then the fact that it's connected, the Triumphal Arch is connected to Paris, and that arch, and then the arch in Rome was commissioned by Titus to commemorate the defeat of the Jews in the 70 AD. This is Matthew 23, and rather than read Matthew 23, there's like the show The Chosen has done like a rendition of it, a film rendition of it. Let's just watch this. It's like 3 or 4 minutes long. So this is Matthew 23 from the Bible, and this is Jesus confronting the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees in the temple, and basically saying to them everything that God laid out in that 2 Chronicles passage.
All right. Listen, the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you. But not the works they do. Where they preach, but do not practice.
Wait, what?
They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others.
This is outrageous.
For they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. And they love the place of honor at feasts and being called rabbi by others.
We are rabbis.
Stop interrupting him! I've said some of this in Capernaum. But now I say this to you here in Jerusalem, in the courts of the temple itself. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, and you yourselves don't go in, but you don't let anyone else in either. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourself.
Jesus! Stop this at once!
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. For you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. But in your actions, you now and will reveal that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. You serpents, you brood of vipers! How will you escape being condemned to hell?
Every one of your words will be recorded and reported to the high priest!
By all means, follow in the footsteps of your ancestors!
It's quite the slapdown.
Them to kill.
Yeah. So like, that's again, that's from the Bible, Matthew 23. And basically he what Jesus is saying, Jesus, you can see the looks on his followers, his apostles' faces. They're like very, like, there's a lot of consternation and concern because they're like, we don't understand why you're doing this. The Messiah is supposed to be, it was written that the Messiah was supposed to be this great warrior who comes down and liberates the Jews from their captors. Isn't that Rome? Why are you not liberating us from Rome? Yeah. And his whole point was, I'm not here to liberate you from, the physical shackles of your life. I'm here to liberate you from the spiritual shackles of your sin. And the people who are basically your captors are actually your religious leaders who have betrayed you and are just serving themselves. They're so deeply indulged in their sin that they will never get to heaven, and they actually are servants of the devil because of that. And that's what he's saying to them in their face. And then he's also pointing out that they're following in the footsteps of the men who came before them, who betrayed God, and then as a result of that, this is in the Old Testament, were punished. Israel is punished over and over and over and over again in the Bible because they keep betraying God and they keep going against what he tells them to do. And so he has to punish them. The wrath of God comes out and punishes them. And what's interesting is like the real irony of the whole story to me is that the expectation, even among his own followers, certainly among the Pharisees, is that the Messiah was supposed to come and liberate them from Rome. Instead, what God does is he uses Rome as an instrument to destroy the thing that he views as the gatekeeper to heaven, which is the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the temple, which is why, decades later in 70 AD, the Roman Empire comes in and destroys the temple, in which Jesus says every stone in this temple will be torn down because Jerusalem has turned its back on God, turned its back on me, and because of that, Jerusalem is now condemned. And then, in an even greater twist of irony, the Roman Empire becomes the vehicle that spreads Christianity across the known world. So it's like God has this very ironic sense of humor where the thing that was viewed as like this great oppressor that was keeping God's people down actually becomes the vehicle to spread the word of Christ across the world, the Roman Empire. And now, I can't watch that scene and not think of not only the American deep state, all those words I think that were said can easily be applied to the U.S. government. I also think it obviously can be applied to the Israeli government and what they're doing right now.
So I guess the question I have then is is it the case that for those who are fulfilling prophecy in their minds are themselves is it the case that there is a belief that in order for retribution to befall the wayward Zionists who missed the ball the first time they had the chance 2,000 years ago, they took the wrong, they made the wrong choice, and now 2,000 years later, there's repercussions to that. Is it the case that this entire greater Israel has to be reconstituted first? Does that thing that's there on the screen need to be built up first? Does the temple need to be built up in order for it to all be wiped out? Because it was already wiped out. So for it to happen again, does it have to be built for that third time, for that final purgative moment in the minds of these? I see it as kind of like witchcraft, frankly. But
yeah. Well, that's a really, really important question. And I'm sure there are people like dispensationalists who will say, yes, we have to let them do this whole thing so that then we can come in and spank them for being naughty. Again, I don't adopt the mentality that we're living through the end of days. I'm very open to all possibilities, right? But I don't live my life under the assumption that oh, I'm so special. We're so special because we get to live through this really, really important time in human history. I mean, this is a very important time in human history, but is this the important time? The end of days. I think there's a little bit of narcissism there, like you're indulging in when you just assume, because every generation has believed that, by the way. Like every generation has believed, oh, we're living through the end of times. There's the Antichrist. It's Hitler. It's Napoleon. It's it's Caesar. Like whatever.
Friedrich II Hohenstaufen. It's
there's always been a character like in every generation where they pointed to and they're like that. Obama. Like people are like Obama's the Antichrist, right? But again, I think that's like a little narcissistic because all those people were wrong. Like they weren't living through the end of days. I mean, maybe they were, maybe that was the beginning and it's a long process. But again, like I'm not a dispensationalist, so I don't think that's what's actually happening here. It could be. But I do think that that dispensationalists are in control of, or in some level of control of Israel, and are supporting it and are pushing it to build the greater Israel empire as part of that dispensationalist mindset, right? Whatever their motivation may be, whether they actually believe in this crap, like this stuff that we're gonna build this third temple and we're gonna summon Moshiach, or as I understand it, like these Christian Zionists like Ted Cruz think that that if we help them do this, the Pharisees do this, the modern Sanhedrin do this, then God will come and smite them, and we'll get this. We'll get the
or Mike Huckabee. We could see that clearly as the type of ideology that he probably has lurking behind his eyeballs, as the guy who really does seem to believe fully that the Jews do have the right to simply spread and take all of the other lands, including Lebanon, who it's kind of strange that he's been assigned to be a part of the negotiating team to negotiate a peace between Israel and Lebanon, considering it's that guy who openly said that Lebanon should just become the property of Israel. But yeah, there's probably that going on. I was a little annoyed by the fact that amongst the Trump team, at least, there was no, like, it's all Genesis and Revelation. I would have liked a little bit more Jesus, or a little bit of Paul, or a little bit of because there's great stuff. There's so much like great wisdom in the Gospels and the New Testament, but to go straight for Revelation after you've done Genesis, I don't know. I kind of
it's not surprising though, because I think a lot of these people are dispensationalists. I think the people like in the cabinet are like, I think a lot of these people are actually dispensationalists. I don't necessarily think Trump is, but again, I think he has brought these people in as television characters. Like, I don't even know how much power some of these people have. Like do any of these people, I mean, I subscribe to John Harold's series Devolution, like that actually happened. And the basic premise is that the power of the government was devolved. We're in a continuity of government protocol right now, and at some point the government will be reconstituted, but I don't think that it's actually happened yet. And if that hasn't happened yet, I asked this question at GART, if that hasn't happened yet, does that mean that this administration, the cabinet, doesn't actually have any power? And is it possible that President Trump has brought all these people in, surrounded them with all of the optics that they actually are these things that they've been told they are? You're the secretary of this, you're the secretary of that. And they're sitting there in their day-to-day life, like their day-to-day, like actually doing the work and being fed intel and like putting stuff out. But it's all one giant psyop that's being run against them. I mean, like, is that possible? Maybe. I mean, look at what's happening with Tulsi Gabbard right now. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, I maintain, I think is the only person in the whole administration that I actually think is I earnestly trust to drain the swamp. There might be a few others, but look at what's happening right now. There were, over the past 36 hours, there has been rumors that have been pushed across social media that she has been given till, what is it, June? I think it's June to resign. They're like, you have till June to resign. Like, that's what the narrative is right now. It's bullshit. Like, I think it's all probably fake news, but the biggest influencers on X are pushing that. The story is that Trump hates Tulsi Gabbard, and that, like, it's been one attack after one attack after one attack against Tulsi Gabbard. They want her out so bad, and yet she hasn't been expelled. Joe Kent, I mean, if you go look at the stuff that Joe Kent is posting right now, he is being very supportive of President Trump. He hasn't done anything subversive, in my opinion, as far as like accusing Trump of being malicious or being bad or betraying America or anything like that. He's actually blaming all the people around him and saying they're bad people around Trump who are steering him down this bad path, and we need to pull back from that. I think he's actually telling the truth. I think he's actually saying Trump has surrounded himself with people who, if left to their own devices, if they were actually granted power, would lead us into this abyss that we're looking at right now, like World War III. I question how much power any of these people actually have, though, because I do subscribe to the theory of devolution.
Okay, cool. Want to read a couple of ads? I could do that.
Please. Well, yeah, right. Let's do the Patriot.
The Patriot one? Okay, let's start with that one. Then we have conscious strength. So here, let me just do the Patriot first. All right. We are in the middle of the worst stretch. We are in the middle of the worst stretch of data breaches this country has ever seen, and it's hitting right here in the middle of tax season. In just the last 90 days, a government contractor that handles Medicaid and benefits for 46 states got hacked. 25 million Americans had their social security numbers and medical records stolen. The Texas Attorney General called it the largest breach in American history. Panera Bread, 5 million customers exposed. Under Armour, 72 million email addresses dumped online, all on top of a record 3,300 data breaches in 2025 alone. Here's why you need to care right now. Criminals are using the stolen data to file tax returns in your name and take your refund. The IRS flagged 2 million returns for identity fraud last year, and if it happens to you, the average wait to get it resolved is almost 2 years. And it's not just breaches. Right now, data brokers and people search sites are publishing your name, your home address, your phone number, even your family members' names, all searchable by anybody online. Scammers don't need to hack you. They just look you up. Patriot Protect fixes that. Their search and destroy protocol scans Google and over 200 data broker sites, finds your personal information and removes it continuously. Most services tell you after your identity gets stolen. Patriot Protect removes the information criminals need to steal it in the first place. Because of what we're seeing right now, Patriot Protect is offering you 15% off any plan. Use promo code Badlands at patriot.protect or patriot/protect.com/history. Your data is already out there. Take it back. Catch episode 2 of America First Stories on Badlands Media to learn more. All right, cool. All right, so check that out. Patriot Protect.
Yes, and thank you to Patriot Protect for sponsoring the show. Go check that out. Yep, and we certainly want to support the people who support us and are all about this movement.
Yeah, very cool. And let's do one from Conscious Strength as well now. Just see if I've got that up. I do. All right, this is from Jordan. Maha yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength. Founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019, Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, green powders that taste good and mix easy, Shilajit gummies, methylene blue, Zolite, and more. Flip the finger to pharma and be your own doctor and get supplements that you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength to shop now and use promo code Badlands for 10% off. One more time, that is badlandsmedia.tv/strength. So there we go. I also want to just point out to somebody who wrote a question, very, very brief question here regarding Nero. So is Bread Hour just wrote a question I want to just address quickly before we continue. So is the Talmud's account that Nero was a convert to Judaism likely to be true? No, it is unlikely to be true. That is an account that came out in the Babylonian Talmud around the 4th century or so. And Nero, by all evidence, was an initiate of Mithra. If he worshipped any religion, it was the worship of Mithra that he worshipped, and also Helios, that goes with the Mithra as the Sol Invictus warrior cult of the Praetorian Guard. And he was initiated in around 64-65 AD by Tiridates I, the king of Armenia, who was a Zoroastrian priest and visited Rome and carried out the initiation ceremony. So yeah, probably not a Jew, most likely a Mithraic high priest, as were the Templars in their own more Christian rebranded veneer, and which continue on with the Order of the Garter. The Jesuits represent an incarnation of this. The Rosicrucians represent an incarnation of this to this very day. So yeah, not a Jew. Just wanted to address that.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because I certainly don't view this thing that we're up against as like one monolith. I don't view it as like one giant organization that spans the world, and it's like orders are given at the top and disseminated down to like the troop boots on the ground. I view it more as like a confederation of factions that have overlapping interests, but also compete with one another for their own position, like their own power, right? And they, they're all, most of them I would imagine are narcissistic sociopaths. I don't think narcissistic sociopaths share power very well. Like, I don't think they, serve like, I'm gonna work really hard to make sure you have a lot of power. The way that somebody with maybe a more righteous disposition might, enter public service for the right reasons. So I kind of feel like what's happened here is while these groups, I think, have for the most part worked together, in coordination, while also, I think, like I said, battling one another where they do have differences, to jockey for position, much like you've seen like in the mob, right? Where they're like little factions in the mob that will take each other out because they want, more power. It seems like maybe because all these groups have their own agenda, their own incentive structures, some of them have been pitted against one another in ways that they didn't fully anticipate. And now they're just kind of reacting as opposed to being proactive. They're being reactive. And, one of the examples of that, I think, is this whole Israel thing. I think Israel has become kind of the bludgeoning tool against the deep state, because if you look at, like I said, I think Trump is like leaned in, like the way a boxer like leans in with his chin to get the other guy to cross, and then he backs up and counter punches and gives the haymaker. Like, that's what I think Trump's doing here, where he is leaned into this whole like, oh yeah, like I'm totally Netanyahu's puppet. He totally controls me. I'm totally like a Jewish puppet, guys. Like, yeah, like hate me. And now I think the apparatus has recognized that's the attack vector. That's how we can separate Trump from his base. We got to go all in on that. And so here's John Kerry on some late night show saying, oh yeah, Netanyahu presented to us over and over and over again, like go to a war with Iran, but we said no because we're not evil, right? And it's like, this is, so they're going to like speak out of school now, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, like Israel is super evil. Israel is super, like, we've never said this out loud, of course, because, it's not kosher to do that. But yeah, like Netanyahu's super evil. Israel's really bad. And Trump is totally in bed with these guys. So therefore, like, all the animus that y'all are feeling towards Israel, you should also feel towards President Trump. And again, this is like an Ouroboros. It's like the deep state is like eating itself, because I do think that like the Israeli, like the Israel project, even before you get to the Greater Israel Project, just like the Rothschild Israel Project, I think that was created for a number of reasons. I like the sacrificial lamb theory that you've presented. I think absolutely is probably part of it. I also think, just from reading like Theodore Herzl's diary, that a lot of these Jewish oligarchs in Paris and London in the late 1800s just viewed the Eastern Orthodox, like Jewish communities, in the same way Hitler did. Like they they were Untermission, and they were like, we don't want these people coming to Paris or coming to London because they will foment anti-Semitism and we'll all get thrown out. So we should create a little sanctuary to send them all to, where they can have their own little world that we don't really need to mess with. Send them all to the Middle East. Like, just send them all to the Middle East, and that way they won't come to Paris. They won't come to London. I mean, that's literally what some of the Rothschilds were telling Theodore Herzl, and also what Theodore Herzl was using as an argument to the Prussian bankers, because he's like, hey, you have all these these Jewish communities here in Germany that are causing a lot of problems for y'all. What if we just put them all on ships and send them off to the Middle East? And they're like, oh, that would be fantastic. Like, yeah, sign me up for that. So, like, again, these are like different factions like with nefarious intent, and they all have their own incentive structure. Like the Prussian bankers want to get rid of these Jewish communities because they're a headache for them politically. The Rothschilds want to get rid of them because they don't want them to foment anti-Semitism and ruin their life. In London and Paris, but meanwhile, this group, right, does have its, like, they're sitting in the Middle East.
I lost the sound.
It has its own. What's that?
Actually, can people listening? Is it me? Is it my sound that just fell out?
I can still hear
my speaker because I can't hear you all of a sudden. Can people hearing right now?
Let me see.
Hear me or Gordon?
Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me.
Sound is good. Okay, so everyone says the sound is good. I'm going to switch my speakers to my earbud here. Maybe that will work better for some reason.
Okay. Yeah. Everyone says they can hear better. I'm just gonna keep going.
Speakers. Okay. Speak again.
Yeah. So can you hear me now?
Yeah. Speak again.
Test.
No. It's not working. No. Speak again.
Test. I think it's your computer speaker.
I can't hear anything. Yeah. Let me just take this microphone.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going while Matt figures that out. So,
right, how about now?
Like this, like
keep going. Just keep talking. Keep talking.
But so this group that they're sending to the Middle East, ultimately, really in the 1930s, with the help of Adolf Hitler, they have their own incentive structure. They have their own agenda. They have their own ambition. And again, I think a lot of these people, like, these elites, these oligarchs, they're all working together to some extent. There is cross collaboration. But again, there's they have different agendas. I think all of these groups have different agendas. And I do think that these agendas are being turned against one another. I think that when you look at how the timing of all of this, how Credit Suisse collapsed in 2023, how it's now being investigated by Neil Barofsky, we're going to get a report on that. That entire investigation was started by Jewish NGOs that were concerned that Credit Suisse had Nazi bank accounts, had old Nazi gold that was stolen purportedly from Jews, and so they want justice on that. They want the gold. So again, it's like that incentive, right, from these Jewish NGOs to go after the bankers in Switzerland could result in like the entire banking system being exposed as a giant cartel and a giant fraud. And this is something that I don't think necessarily would have happened on a different timeline. If we didn't have these groups being pitted against one another the way they have been pitted against one another. And now, as I laid out before, the incentive structure for Netanyahu and his regime is to plow forward with this war. And I think there are other factions now that are recognizing the problem that this is presenting, the accelerated timeline that it's on. And while they're not necessarily opposed to like the establishment of an empire in the Middle East, they see it as an opportunity to attack President Trump using that as their attack vector. And so again, I think this is like pitting factions against one another, the same way the CIA will go into a foreign country. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Yeah. So like just to recap, Matt, the same way the CIA will go into a foreign country or just like a territory and pit the groups against one another, like create tribalism, create division, right, in order to foment, create Hegelian dialectics in order to foment a color revolution, right? A strategy of tension. I think the strategy of tension has now been applied to the deep state, like whatever you want to call it, and it's screwing everything up because as while you were signing in, I laid out that Netanyahu and his regime have this incentive, like their incentive is to plow forward because they have no choice. Damocles sword hanging over their head, the election coming up. They need to secure the public mandate to remain in power and avoid being prosecuted. And these other groups who maybe wouldn't normally have a problem with, the establishment of this empire in the Middle East, like what do they care? They actually probably see it as a useful mechanism to start World War III. They're attacking this thing because they see it as a very, very convenient opportunity to separate President Trump from his support base, right? And by pointing out, hey, this is evil, what these people are doing, right? Even if they don't believe that. President Trump is with them, ostensibly. He's evil too. So again, it's like he's getting these groups to attack one another. They never attacked this stuff before. I mean, like John Kerry wasn't saying this stuff about Israel 20 years ago. He may like have had his differences politically, like within the safety of the political sandbox, the paradigm, and say, you know, tit for tat. Oh, we oppose this, we oppose that. But John Kerry and President Obama and Barack Obama like helped Netanyahu create ISIS. They negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, which sent hundreds of millions of dollars secretly in cash to Iran, and then that cash was turned around and used to create militant groups that were designed, I think, to foment destabilization campaigns in the Middle East and start World War III. I think like all of that was facilitated by Obama, and it was done on behalf of Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. Like they wanted ISIS to be created, they wanted Assad to be overthrown. That was a huge objective, like platform, a policy platform for the Obama administration. Netanyahu wanted that. So you can't sit here and tell me, well, the Democrats hate Israel. That's why they're doing all this bullshit. The Democrats love Israel just as much as the Republicans do. Alan Dershowitz just formally left the Democrat Party because he was like, I can't believe how much the Democrats hate Israel. It's like, they don't hate Israel. Chuck Schumer's out there talking about how we have to support Netanyahu and we gotta get behind them because they're fighting for their life. It's like the fake paradigm that we've been presented with the Republican Democrats as it relates to the Middle East is being totally exposed right now. And the fact that Kash Patel yesterday came out and indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center, I'm sure you saw that, where he said, I've been listening to like the zeitgeist for the past 24 hours, and everyone's like, well, wait a minute, these people were making all their money and raising all their money on attacking white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan and all this and neo-Nazis. Meanwhile, they're actually funding all these people are literally on their payroll and they're giving them money that they're getting in grants from U.S. taxpayers. This is all fraud. These people are all going to go to prison. And by the way, take that same dynamic, that concept, and apply it to everything else, including ISIS, radical Islamic terrorism, all of it. It's all just fake. It's all just created in order to give like a boogeyman to attack.
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center increasingly became a tool. It was infiltrated and taken over.
Change your mic. Change your mic.
I see.
Yes. Okay. That should be better. Yeah, it seems like the Southern Poverty Law Center had become increasingly a tool for the CIA because after Martin Luther King Jr. had died, a lot of his institutions were they already had like sleepers and incubators inside the civil rights movement, but that really became taken over as a host by this parasite, because that was the same thing that happened even in Canada in the 1990s. I did a little video on this, how CSIS, the Canadian sort of mirror image of the CIA, was caught having created and funded Canada's only white supremacist Nazi group called the Heritage Front. And this all came out in like 1997. And it was discovered that the founder and the president of the Heritage Front, Grant Bristol, was himself a CSIS agent. And they'd been pouring a massive amount of resources to create an enemy that they could then use to justify their need to create more of a surveillance state, more regulations on people's ability to have firearms, which, by the way, now in Canada, you're not allowed legally to own a firearm unless it's a hunting rifle, but otherwise you can't by law. And we saw the same thing, right? The Fordham University carried out a study in 2012 going through all of the known cases of terrorism that had been intervened upon by the FBI since 2001. So for that 11-year period, and found that like 89% of all of the cases investigated found the FBI to be behind the creation, the funding, the direction of these various cells that we were then told, hey, whether it's the Boston bombers or the Christmas tree bomber, all of these things, the Newburgh 4, all of these busts all had direct hands of America's intelligence agencies behind their funding. There's actually a mosque in, I think it was Michigan, that had to call out a court order because an FBI informant kept on trying to pay money to the various members of the mosque to be a part of his cell. And they actually had to put out a restraining order by law to keep this guy away from their mosque. So it's like this is such a proven modus operandi. And the fact that, the Southern Poverty Law Center was doing this now just shows how ubiquitous this thing had spread. It's not too much of a surprise, but it is an irony, a juicy irony, that they were pouring all of this cash. I think up to $1 million for one of their white supremacist informants who was participating in or maybe organizing the Charlestown event some years back. And that guy was given like $1 million taxpayer money from the law center. So yeah, you definitely have the creation of boogeymen of enemy images as a convenient way to keep the population in a state of psychological terror, of fear. The idea of Islamist terrorism as well was very useful, both for the Jews living in the Middle East who had formerly thought that they could possibly think through a solution to the problems of basically just having created a new nation with a lot of people that have a lot of resentment because you had to abuse them and steal their land. So there's understandable abuses, but there was still an idea from both sides, from the Arafat side and from the labor Zionist side in the 90s, that thought that, hey, we can work together still, we could figure this out, we can build projects. And that had to come undone. So Netanyahu's support for, Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood Front Group, other things that were more of a more violent orientation was very useful for his ambitions and for those who control him. But for me, like when it comes to the oligarchy, the way I tend to think about it these days is like, we know that they have a recipe book. We know that there's like certain formulas that they apply and that works. And it's a very ambiguous idea. Like oligarchy just means garchy is like ruled by olis, is Greek for the few. So ruled by the few. But it's like, what does that even mean? Certainly not democracy. That's sort of the opposite. But it can use democracy. It can coexist with democracy, as we've seen with many cases where the demos has been culturally castrated to the point that people's individuality is dissipated and they tend to become more homogenizable with a mob, with a tribe, with a pack. And as soon as you get somebody in with a crowd, they will do things that they would never do as an individual, right? We've seen that with cases of riots, with lynch mobs. You get somebody into a frenzy, an emotional state with a crowd, and they will do shameful things that as individuals they would not do.
Yes.
And those crowds are much more easy to do the Pied Piper thing with, to do a spell with rhetoric, with the magic of the manipulation of words and emotions and false lines of reasoning that could flatter the egos of those who you want to influence and manipulate. You say, oh, there's wisdom in crowds. Everyone knows that this, whatever, name your lie is true. And so, crucify that guy over there, like whatever the case may be. And you can direct the herd that way. And so you can have the illusion of democracy, but not the reality of it. But that also requires a cultural decay, a cultural degeneration that destroys people's ability to think as sovereign individuals. And so the demos was behind the so-called murder of Socrates, but really was it? Like they voted democratically to have Socrates drink the hemlock and die for the sins of questioning the pantheon of gods and corrupting the youth. But was it really the demos? No, they stopped thinking for themselves. So the entire thing was orchestrated by the high priesthood that hated Socrates and what he was creating. And the same thing for Jesus. You could say, oh yeah, look, all of the Jews in the crowd, they all like wanted, Pontius Pilate to kill this heretic. But really, was it ultimately this mindless crowd of anger, or did it have also something to do with who was manipulating the crowd from behind, or who was even like giving perhaps Pontius Pilate commands from, I believe, Tiberius played a big role further removed in the center of Rome, giving his steward Pontius Pilate in Judea instructions on how to approach the killing of Jesus, because I think that the high priesthoods that ran Rome which again were Mithraic. If you look at Tiberius, just like Nero later on, he was a worshiper of Mithra. He was an initiate. He had his Isle of Capri as well, where he would worship Helios and Dionysius, the Apollo Dionysius, sort of solar deity, and orgiastic frenzy at night, Dionysian revelry that involved human sacrifice. But all of that was being organized by a small coterie known as the Committee of 15. So it's like, as diverse as Rome was in its multiple factions, there was still, layers of control. So each one seemed to be, from its vantage point, looked from a bottom-up perspective, it seemed to be from the lower order that was the control mechanism. Was people would say, oh, it's the Praetorian Guard that's controlling everything. Well, the Praetorian Guard, it's true, they control a lot. They even assassinated like over a dozen emperors at different times that displeased somebody. But it's like, when you look at what the Praetorian Guard was, well, they were themselves all religiously devoted initiates into the cult of Mithra. So who was controlling the cult of Mithra? Well, what was that a part of? And so Mithra was one of three complementary secret orders, right? They're the cult of Isis, the cult of Cybele Attis, and the cult of Mithra were the three dominant opponents to Christianity in those early days. And they would work together. They all had the same degrees of initiation. They all had the same induction into the Eleusinian mysteries, the same kind of formulas in deconstructing the minds of initiates to be reconstructed as human wannabe gods with like giant egos that can't see how they're being managed. But you had above that, all three were being managed by the Committee of 15. So in Rome, you did have something known as the Committee of 15, which had endured for centuries and centuries, since the beginning of the Roman Republic, which was the only committee of priests who came from the noble families who were initiated into the highest of the cults, and that had the sole authorization to interpret the Sibylline oracles, which were brought into Rome in like 599 BC, when Rome was still a kingdom. And these Sibylline oracles were like the transcribed mutterings of the priestess, the drugged up priestess of Apollo at Delphi, who had her basically mutterings. They would go into a drugged up state, the way these oracles would work, right? You pay money to the priests. They'd have their woman who would be sitting usually over like psychedelic gaseous vapors, and they'd be giving like concoctions of psychotropic, drugs mixed in with like some psilocybin, some opiates, whatever. They'd have their little concoctions, and that would give somebody a sense of being in an altered state. And they would start transmitting a sort of stream of consciousness, musings of like visions of, you have all, when you look at the Sibylline oracles, there's whole academic research on this, features like what sorts of things they would say. Well, 13 moons will rise in the east, and 2 suns will rise in the west on the 13th day of the 14th hour of the year of the eagle in the 7th, zodiac of Pisces, whatever it is. So they would use this like very, and the star and the skies would be set ablaze as the angel of redemption would emerge onto this blah 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 at this 14th hour. And so they would like use just very cryptic language, again, totally stream of consciousness stuff, highly interpretable based on whatever the interpreters, the high priests that were overseeing. Usually there would be 12 or 13 of them. They were overseeing this woman, and then they would just tell the general or the king who was coming to pay the money to get word of what do the gods want us to do, what does Apollo want us to do. And they would say, well, Apollo was telling you clearly through this like allegorical tale to go make an alliance with Medea, or go declare war on Persia, or whatever, right? Like go in and allow in this mystery cult as a sanctioned cult in Rome. Like that's what they did to bring in Cybele and Isis. Is the Committee of 15 said, okay, these books, the transcribed utterings of the oracle, it's kind of like the I Ching, say that if we're going to win the war against Hannibal in the Second Punic War, well, Apollo, speaking through these oracles, says that we have to invite the cult of Cybele from Anatolia into Rome, and then the gods will bestow their blessings and we will defeat Hannibal and save Rome. Okay, so they did that. Well, next thing you have is all of the young men in Rome are cutting off their penises to become hierophants, Galli of the Kali cult, you know, and all of the Roman parents are pissed off because they're like, oh, my son, they still had a very like stoic, you know, honor thy family type of ethos, and that was not meshing well. And they were just freaking out because thousands of young men in Rome were all going off to get castrated to be androgynous deities that transcend male and female as part of becoming part of the high priesthood of that particular cult. And otherwise, there was just orgies, you know, that were corrupting the young girls. And the cult had to go underground after a few decades because it was just not meshing until it came back under Caligula in an open way. But it also existed with the cult of Mithra. So everywhere we see that there's a temple of Cybele in Rome, that there've been excavations right over the years that have brought out these various temples of Cybele, there's a high degree of proximity to a Mithraeum, where the cult of Mithra, that's a male-only cult, would worship in their underground Mithraeum, and that featured Mithra killing the bull, looking over at Helios, and on the other side having Luna, or Venus, you know, a dark deitess, female god of the night with a male god of the sun, overlooking him you know, ritually killing the bull. And that became the emblem for the Persian cult that was brought in from Persia, which had formerly existed in Babylon under the cult of Marduk. It took on a form of Mithra in Persia. Before that, even it was in India in a different form. And then it was rebranded into the Roman pantheon. And that's what Tiberius, who again was trying to, it was the Mithra cult that was a major rival to Christianity because they had a lot in similarity in some ways. You know, as far as like celebrating Mithra's birthday around December 25th, which at the time was the solstice, that was like one of the things that had been practiced. There was a battle, right, around the idea of the son of the sun. It's a solar deity, right? So Mithra is the Sol Invictus, who's the son of the fallen father or he's the fallen son of the father, which is kind of like a Lucifer Christ Gnostic idea. If you look at the Gnostic scriptures or the Gnostic gospels of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century that also tried to undermine Christianity, they were largely repackaged Mithraic and Cybelian mystery religions, but that tried to emulate a Christian veneer to destroy Christianity from within by embodying a different kind of Jesus, not the one that you just saw in The Chosen, but rather a Jesus that was much more Sethian. It's called the Sethian Gospels because the idea was that Jesus was the avatar. That was the spirit of Jesus, not one of love, loving thy neighbor, and all of these moral principles. It wasn't that. If you read like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Philip that they discovered at Nag Hammadi, they're actually, it's a very amoral Jesus that professes to have secret knowledge that he only gives to his favorite disciples, Mary Magdalene, who's also, you know, it alludes to the fact that she's also his lover, and John, who he gives special secret information to, but he's the avatar of Lucifer, which sort of incarnated as the serpent and then incarnated as Jesus and maybe incarnated earlier as Elijah. And that's how they're sort of or Enoch at a different moment. So that's how they're trying to spin it. But you see that these are just synthetically created religious cults that were designed by those same things that controlled and designed the cult of Mithra, that I think were much more tied to the Committee of 15, which itself might have had rivalry. I mean, at a certain point, I know Cicero came in and tried to disrupt the Committee of 15. So there's definitely, it's not like a godlike control grid, but it's as I was saying, I think of the oligarchy as centralized in a certain way that's more coherent at the top, and then has layers, not infinite layers, not like an infinitely divisible or layered onion, but there are like a limited quantity of layers of mechanism, of lower mechanisms that each one seem to have a greater degree of incoherence as you get down towards the publicly acceptable narratives of the world that we're living in, featuring like, oh yeah, you know, everything's done for oil. There's the oil profits. Everybody wants to just make money. And, you know, like that type of like narrative that tries to boil everything down to everybody wants to make money. That type of mindless type of thing that has no space for any conspiracy for good or for evil. That's like the lowest rung. But above that, you start getting into, you know, the Rothschilds, you get the Jewish banker thing. But then, okay, well, what are these things? Well, they were largely the outcome of Templars needing to use or, you know, controlling all of the banking in the Middle Ages during the Crusades, and then finding it useful to employ court Jews, Hofjuden, as their assets to do the dirty work of using banking for financial, you know, weaponry, usury, and what have you. And then some of them who did really good jobs were rewarded by being upgraded and being granted little licensed dynasties that would be protected as long as their bloodline continued to serve the interests, you know, of the trust that they were entrusted with of managing, whether it was the Rothschilds or the Sassoons. But it's like they were largely just rewarded for being good guard dogs and totally willing to sacrifice their own people at different times were it expedient, because they were more just to be a guard dog, to be vetted, you had to necessarily become a Satanist. You had to get into some dark, like tree of death stuff, a la like mirror image, dark mirror of Kabbalah. Not tree of life, but you look at the tree of life and the tree of death that people often ignore, the tree of death parallel tree, right? But that's what they would actually become more immersed with as all of the Crowleyites and stuff continued to be, who are all obsessed as well about Solomon's temple. And, you know, Crowley, who was following this tradition, who hated the Jews. He despised the Jews, but he loved the Kabbalah. He loved this mystical Gnostic tradition. And he loved, like, he wrote books on the greater and lesser key of Solomon. And he wrote books, and he's popularizing the occult testament of Solomon, this fake book from the medieval ages that promoted the idea that Solomon built his temples by harnessing the power of Beelzebub and the demonic hordes through his special ring with 2 triangles. And that stuff is like really taken seriously by the higher ups, the Charles Warrens, the United Grand Lodge assholes at the upper, higher up echelons. So that's how I tend to look at their issues today, is like factions, yes, but there is more coherence when I look at the higher shells. And I don't think we can ever know what's the detail of those particular shells without actually being in it. But as far as an induction I can make by triangulation of data points, that's sort of where I'm at as my hypothesis.
Oh yeah, and I think it's reasonable to suspect, to speculate that these various factions, like the confederation of factions, are being controlled by like a hierarchy, right? Like an invisible hand that maybe they're not even aware exists, or maybe they are, depending on their position. But yeah, it's like they're manipulating these little factions to advance their own agenda, right? That maybe these factions individually are not fully aware of, kind of like compartmentalization in like an intelligence operation, right? I think all that is very reasonable. And like Ash and I have done extensive shows about the more theological elements here, and I think we're in agreement here to some extent that her and I, that the Pharisees in Jesus' day were practicing a different religion than like the people in the streets, like and that seems to be kind of what Jesus is accusing them of doing, is that they're practicing a different religion to some extent. It's certainly a different spirituality, right, than what's out there in the streets, than what what Jesus and his followers are practicing. And I think what we're seeing now, this is something that Ash has been pointing out for a while, is have you heard of this House of Abraham thing in the UAE? So if you look it up, so there's this thing that they just finished building it a few years ago, but it's called the House of Abraham. It's in the UAE, and basically, I'm not super familiar with it. Ash has really educated me more on it. But basically what it is it's like an attempt, I think it's like a mosque, a church, and a synagogue. Like it's some sort of a monument.
Oh, yeah, that thing's shady as sin. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so like what Ash puts forward is, she says basically what this thing is it's like merging the 3 religions, but just removing Jesus. Like it's like, hey, we can all come together and like agree on like the basic principles of our religion. Like if you look at the 10 Commandments, like we all kind of agree on the 10 Commandments, right? Like all three of us. So why don't we focus on the 10 Commandments? Why don't we focus on, you know, the common ground, and let's eliminate the controversy. Let's eliminate the things that cause us to fight with one another. And I mean, what greater thing is there than Jesus? Like that causes a lot of division, right? So let's just get rid of Jesus. We can, you know, maybe we can keep some of his teachings because he had some good ideas, but let's just stop talking about Jesus, right? And let's just kind of erase him from the collective memory, and let's just focus on the, you know, the common ground. By the way, I think that is, my understanding is that's spelled out somewhere in like the book of Revelations as some sort of, you know, something the Antichrist is going to do. But that's neither here nor there, because again, I'm not a dispensationalist. But I mean, listen, like go look at what Ted Cruz is saying right now. Ted Cruz is like, when asked about the Christ is King thing, he's like, I refuse to say Christ is King because it's offensive to some people. And it's like, whoa, dude, like you're supposed to be the hardcore, you know, like almost like insufferable, you know, evangelical politician, and you won't even say Christ is King because you're afraid that you're going to offend people. Like that, I mean, that should just be like, stop the record, slam the brakes on, like, hold up, like what did you just say? That should be like a break the fourth wall, like verisimilitude has been broken now, and now this is no longer a believable story. But you know, people hear him say that and they think, oh well, yeah, like we don't want to offend our you know, Israeli brethren. It's all very, very, very silly. But one of the conversations I had, and I've had this conversation a few times at GART, but I was speaking to, you know, Jewish people at GART. These are like American Jews, and I had friends who were Jewish growing up. Like I went to their bat mitzvah, and they were telling me, they're like, you know, I've just never heard of any of this stuff. I've never heard of the Talmud. I've never heard of the Zohar. I've never heard of the Kabbalah. Like, what is all this stuff? And talking to them and kind of like asking them questions and them explaining their like lived experience, it sounds to me like what they go through is that they go to synagogue as children. They study the Torah, like the original Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, what most Christians think of when they think of a Torah. They have their bar mitzvah when they're 13, and that's it. That's like the end of their education, right? And then they just go to synagogue for the rest of their life. But if you go to Israel, that's not the curriculum. The curriculum is actually not the Pentateuch. It's the Talmud. It's the Zohar. It's the Kabbalah. It's like those books, you know, which is much more like in mysticism. The Talmud explicitly says that Jesus is the greatest heretic of all time and is burning in hell, like boiling in hell in a pit of feces, like boiling feces or whatever.
Yeah, I was just doing an interview with somebody, though. You got to be careful with some of these things, because what was proven to me was that a lot of the most inflammatory, and there was bad stuff in the Talmud, don't get me wrong, but because it's like the composition of like 400 different rabbis that made their commentaries. Like, but in the worst stuff that I've encountered, like Jesus burning in excrement and semen and whatever, and that's actually mistranslated. It actually is not Jesus. It's somebody else. Like a lot of those things, you'd be surprised, are either made up. Like the worst of the scary quotes are either made up completely and they're just not in the Talmud, or they're completely mistranslated to make it seem to an English speaker that it's super bad, but when you actually read the original, it's completely dishonestly done. So it's actually not, I'm just saying we have to always be careful in that realm of translations or little snippets of the Talmud that go around in English translation form in a lot of these, basically in the internet world. And it's been around since, you know, for hundreds of years, they've been using these same types of techniques. Wow, my camera crazy, eh?
Just zoomed in on you. Yeah.
Weird.
Well, okay. So regardless of what the specific scripture in the Talmud says, you know, I don't know if I call it scripture, like, you know, whatever it is. It's very clear though that there is an animus in Israel for Jesus. Like there is that is vocalized not only by these yeshiva students, as they're called, that those are the Haredim students, like these are the kids who are exempt from military service because they dedicate their life to like religious studies, right? That's their service to the state. And like rabbis as well, who you know, the fact that these Christian leaders walk through the streets and are spit on constantly. There is like a real animus.
Oh yeah.
An animus, I think, towards Christians and towards Jesus specifically. I mean, look at that image that went viral right the other night, that of the IDF soldier smashing the crucifix of Jesus in Debel, Lebanon. And then like the IDF and the Israeli government coming out and saying, yeah, that's authentic. That actually happened. We're really sorry. Our bad. You know, that animus, I think, is exclusive to Israel and to like those communities that are in that, you know, those religious sects that are headquartered, I would say, in Israel. Like, I don't, like, from my conversations, I don't even think that, I think if you spoke to like the average American Jewish person, it's like they don't even think about Jesus. Like, it's not even like something that's comes up as a discussion point or is like talked about, as at least my understanding. But there is real animus in the theological sects, you know, like because there's plenty of quote unquote what they call secular Jews. They would describe, I think, all American Jews, the ones who aren't in like Orthodox or Hasidic communities, people who dress normally, who dress just like your average person, who don't wear like the clothing that makes them look like they're, you know, Amish or whatever. Those are described as secular Jews. They've integrated with the secular society, and they don't, you know, live their life according to whatever the Orthodox and Hasidic communities do. But when you go into those other communities and you listen to what they say and you hear what they're fomenting, they are fomenting like this animus toward that idea. And again, like, from my understanding of it, the animus is directed more towards the fact that, like in that scene that we watched from The Chosen, their expectation was that the Messiah was going to be this warlord who was going to lead them as an army against Rome and then liberate them and like establish this new kingdom, right? Like, that's even what Jesus' own followers, his own disciples thought that. And he had to like reprogram them to not think that anymore. So that's where I think a lot of that animus is, because it's very clear if you listen to Bibi Netanyahu, that's what he thinks too. He thinks that the Jewish Messiah is coming and it's going to be this warlord who is going to, you know, like save the chosen people from all the anti-Semites and basically create this kingdom for them to live in. That's, I think, like a lot of like what's fueling what we're seeing right now unfolding with the Greater Israel Project. How much of that is tied to like the cult of Mithra? How much of that is being pushed by that? I think that's an interesting like rabbit hole to kind of pursue and debate to have. But it seems to me that they've lost control of that. Like whatever level of control they had over that and that they were using and that they were planning to use to weaponize against humanity and create, you know, like a World War III situation. It seems like they've lost control of that. And the person who's now controlling it is President Trump, because he's the one who is like pushed them down this down this pathway where they have no choice but to plow forward now. And as Trump said when he was asked, you know, did you do this because of like, did Israel force you into doing this? And he said, maybe I'm the one who forced Israel to do this. Maybe I'm the one who forced Israel to go to war with Iran. And it seems kind of in hindsight, that's true. Like, he did it, and knowing that they were always going to do it. And now it's like they have jumped in and they can't just jump out. They have to finish the task, so to speak. Meanwhile, Trump is like, yeah, I'm extending the ceasefire. I'm doing the thing that nobody thought I was going to do, that I said I wouldn't do. I'm extending the ceasefire. We're going to work with Iran. We're going to have peace. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I think that there are other factions and out there that are probably less concerned with like this specific storyline, but it seems like the storyline's taken over like the entire political zeitgeist, and that's what's now kind of like fueling everything.
Well, for sure, the very important considerations, absolutely. And for me, it's like I said at the very beginning, the destruction of supply chains, the destruction of overall energy supplies. These are like, for me, the biggest concerns that I can hold on to, because these are measurable, like how long it takes to build a refinery, how much impact it has on the scarcity of food, on the increase of fertilizer prices, of the ability to even manufacture fertilizer or urea, the shutdown of natural gas facilities that also supply these things. So all of that, I could see, like, that's my point of big concern that I'm holding right now in the back of my head is like, I'm looking at East Asia going into massive crisis. 20% of the restaurants have been just shut down in, where is it, in Mumbai, and Philippines has gone to a national crisis, getting aided by China through some handouts because they've gone through their reserves. All Asian deliveries of oil from the Persian Gulf that gives 90% 80% of the oil and natural gas to East Asia it ended on April 1st, hasn't restarted really. And Africa, you got like 8 different countries in Africa that are seizing up, going into crisis mode. Zimbabwe, Sudan, South Sudan, they're diluting fuel. There's governmental mandates to like dilute fuel in order to stretch it out a little bit longer. So restrictions of electricity, that are going to create more brownouts and then blackouts. So all of these things, Japan has shut down half their ferry and bus services in like big chunks of Japan. So there's a big list, on top of everything that we're seeing with these refineries blowing up. You have the effects of the Iran project that is literally just shutting down global supplies by up to 20%, says the the International Energy Agency says that approximately on average 15 to 20% of global supplies are going to be taken offline as reserves are being drawn down and not being replenished. So again, the ramifications to human life is just so big. China's been made more vulnerable. They're cut off now. They're not really getting most of their gas. They were getting like a ton of gas from Venezuela at high discounts because they invested in so much infrastructure in Venezuela over the years, and that's how Venezuela was paying them back. They're not getting that anymore. They're mostly cut off right now from their Persian oil. A lot of that's been highly reduced. Not a lot's getting through. So it seems like, when I see that getting resolved, I'll be more inclined to have a more optimistic hypothesis that I'm willing to wear. But right now, this has to be resolved in a more serious way because I'm seeing like unnecessary death falling upon the world and a lot of innocent people so far if this continues.
Yeah, and those are real concerns that should be adjudicated in terms of our understanding. I also wonder, if we understand that up until this point, those supply chains, those logistics, those resources were all controlled by the worst people on earth, right? And if the idea is to seize those resources back and take over those supply chains and disrupt those operations so that those bad people no longer have a stranglehold over resources and can create artificial scarcity.
That doesn't work because then Iran had control of the Strait of Hormuz. Like they weren't. Now all of a sudden were they all that bad? Did they want to? Did they have the evidence of wanting to shut down traffic from the Strait of Hormuz?
But Trump's now calling it the Strait of Iran. Like he's now saying they're still going to have control over it.
Yeah, I know, but it's not being used right now. Like it's created this massissive crisis of reduction.
Yeah, but think about who originally went to Iran and drilled the first.
And he's saying, what's that? Yeah, the British Empire went there.
The British Empire, yeah.
But
so
Iran has been enjoying full control for decades now, and it's like they had control over the strait. So if we rename it the Strait of Iran, but then who's going to is it just going to be Iran controlling it because we've given it the name? Or it seems like it does seem to be an effort to get other forces to have joint control over the strait. Like isn't that
it could be it could be bigger than just the strait though. It could be like the Strait of Hormuz could just be one element of it, and there could be other. There's a whole like obviously the whole world is impacted by energy prices. So the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, energy prices going up, that disrupts, as you just pointed out, that disrupts a lot of other sectors. I don't have the answer. Like I would love to speak to someone maybe like Alex Craner, who probably is more read in on like the oil industry and like understand, okay, who's taking the biggest beating here? Because we know that like the two companies that took the biggest beating in Venezuela were ConocoPhillips and ExxonMobil. Trump straight up told ExxonMobil, you can't come back to Venezuela, you're out, because they complained, well, wait a minute, you didn't actually overthrow anything. It's still the same government. And Trump was like, okay, if you're going to talk like that, see ya. And then ConocoPhillips, he like humiliated
on that
ConocoPhillips.
level. Yeah, on that level.
Yeah.
But on the higher level, China is really hurting as well for having had now the Venezuelan relationship really dissipate completely, because now they're not allowed to do business really. There's very little business that's been permitted that was formerly being settled in Chinese yuan, again, highly discounted. So China's really being hurt and cut off by that. That's not necessarily a great thing if we treat China as a positive player in things and not an evildoer, as some have been led to believe. It's the same thing for Eurasia, like all of Eurasia is getting highly destabilized. The Belt and Road Initiative seems like it's gone now. It's highly compromised by virtue of what's been unleashed with the bombing of Iran. That was like a key artery to make the Belt and Road Initiative work. That's now really potentially going to go up in smoke if the Greater Israel Project is the outcome of this. They're not going to cooperate with that. I don't know, man. Like the North-South Transportation Corridor, that was the other backbone of the Eurasian Cooperation Program. That's been like highly destabilized with the U.S. control now over the last year of that little strait in Azerbaijan. That's not allowing for Russia to really build their project properly or control that project or that artery. So it doesn't seem good, man. It just seems bad.
Yeah, see, but the way I'm looking at it is that Greater Israel presents a common enemy that is now bringing together every other country in the region who have not collaborated before. The Antalya diplomatic forum, I think it was last week in Turkey, where Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia met to discuss what are we going to do about Israel. I mean, that represents like the military might, aside from Iran, in the Middle East. Countries, by the way, that 10 years ago were not speaking to one another. And now they're meeting, discussing how are we going to collaborate and work together to take on this monster that's been unleashed on our region. So I think that we might actually see cooperation. Iraq is now working with both Syria and Saudi Arabia to pipe oil both to Saudi Arabia, the Red Sea, but also to pipe oil up to Syria, the Mediterranean, bypassing Israel in both sides. So I don't think the Greater Israel Project is going to work. I think the whole thing's going to bottom out and collapse.
Likely. It's definitely likely.
But to just to demonstrate like one example of what I was referring to earlier, this is love or hate Steve Bannon, whatever your opinion of him is, he does, I think, represent a he has his finger of the pulse of like the zeitgeist and the narrative. Here is Bannon attacking Alex Karp in Palantir and the security state, the surveillance state, using Israel as the point of attack.
They're building a surveillance state, and they're putting this. We're going to give you a manifesto, and the manifesto is going to talk about we need everybody to have universal military service. We have to have. Well, look, bro, this is not Israel. We understand Karp is super pro-Israel. This is not Israel. As a veteran that came out of the volunteer service, we don't want everybody, right? You don't need us. Highly inefficient. We now have self-selection of people that volunteer for the military. And I think anybody that's a professional in the military would not want universal service, but they try to put a false front of patriotism and nationalism when they're anything but. These guys are the ultimate deep staters. They provide the surveillance apparatus to take the deep state to a much darker place than it already is. It's a pretty damn dark place.
Well, again, this idea of surveillance, it makes sense when you're talking about surveilling your enemies, but these systems aren't just used for that. They're used for...
But your point is we are the enemy, the American people. That guy in front of the town hall, Hollingsworth, he's the enemy.
Yeah, if you have a system,
people, yes, come on.
If you have the system pointed outwards, I can see the justification, although there's a lot of questions. But the thing is, these systems are already being pointed inwards at us. And to the extent...
Number two principle, Hollingsworth is a bigger enemy of the surveillance state than some guy running around in Iraq. Okay, keep saying our problems are not in downtown Tehran. That's what Karp. It's just like the Israelis. They try to continue to convince you. And hey, the Arabs are just as bad. I'm not selecting out just Israel for abuse here. The Arabs are worse. Now they're coming to us with their hands out. We got to finance them after Dubai. After they got all the bikini influencers in Dubai, now we got to finance it. The enemy is it Hollingsworth?
Yeah, Will Hollingsworth.
Will Hollingsworth is their enemy, right? Basically somebody would stand up in the New England town hall and really fight for freedom and individuality and individual liberty. That is a problem for CARP, right? Because those people are going to sit there and go, guess what? We should not. They are decelerationist. Short break, Joe.
So you can see that the attack vector here is not just Israel. It's all of the things that are connected to it. And the last thing I'll show you is this. Did you see this article? UK special forces are resigning in mass over a war crimes probe related to their operations in Afghanistan and Syria. And so now SAS operators who were operating in those countries between 2010 and 2013 are now like all resigning because their whole program is being investigated for war crimes that they may have committed. So, you know, like as you've explained and we discussed, and Cynthia has researched, a lot of these special forces are often used in these, color revolution operations, and now it looks like they're all resigning because they're being probed.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are. I know in the case of the United States, there's a number of them as well that are also facing some repercussions. Australia too. Yeah, I mean, this was interesting stuff. Let's just end it there because I realize that it's almost 2:00 and I got to prepare for a 2 p.m. But yeah, we live in interesting times. That's for sure. Now, I think one quick thing you and I were talking about is both of our schedules is getting a little bit intense, and we're discussing putting this our project here, our weekly show, on a bit of a postponement for a certain period. We'll get back to it, but the amount of deadlines and projects has really just piled on, and to stay somewhat sane, I agree with that idea as being good for the time being, and then we could circle back. So let's keep doing that and jump on each other's shows as well. On the off ramp, I just began a Breaking Free of PsyOps program on Monday nights. For those who don't know, it's Monday nights at 6 p.m. right before Ghost's Book of Trump at 7:30.
Yeah,
so still back to back. We'll still get your taste of both of our thoughts on a weekly basis, and Ghost like 5 times a week. Man, I think that'll be good.
Yeah. So we'll circle back here in the next few weeks and see what schedules look like, and maybe we will find a different time block if we can, or pre-record shows. But for the next few weeks will be a little bit of a hiatus as we adjust to new work schedules.
Yes,
for both of us. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
All right. So Gordon, always a pleasure. Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us this week's Breaking History. Until next time.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.